Today I'm joined by Gary Hernbroth of Training for Winners. Gary, thank you so much for joining me today. How are you doing?
My pleasure, Karen. My pleasure. I'm excited to be here. Thank you for asking me.
Well, it's my pleasure. Gary, let's start with a little bit about your background. Can you share some of your story with us and how you got started in coaching?
Yeah, it was kind of a natural progression. I got my degree in hospitality business from Michigan State, so I went into the hospitality business. Spent 17 or 18 years there in various leadership roles in operations and sales and marketing. And with that, when you're in operations and sales, you're always dealing with people, whether you're dealing with people on your team, you're managing teams. And then as a director in sales, you're, of course, managing a team, but you're also working very closely with clients from all different kinds of places. And you're kind of coaching them through their programs, or you're trying to work with them on putting a successful event together. And through that, you just kind of build, at least I did, you just kind of build a repertoire of, figuring out people's Rubik's cubes is how I call it. And clients started to say, boy, if you ever want to go in a different work area, you should be a speaker and you have a lot of help for people and stories. And I said, oh, that's very nice. Thank you. And I kind of tossed it off and whatever, but maybe I got the DNA from my dad. He was a life coach, a teacher, educator. He was a professor. He's passed on now. He passed on earlier this year, but he was a professor at a college until he was 86 years old. So he loved it. Maybe I got the DNA from him to help people and help them coach. And then, Karen, I kind of got hit by a lightning bolt along with all this happening, in that I was more excited about coaching up my salespeople than actually ringing the sales bell myself, which was kind of a strange mental thing, because I love, the whole sales thrill of the kill and, get the sales and do that. And that's what salespeople need to have. They need to have that red meat in order to be successful. But I found more satisfying was to coach up my salespeople. And I hired salespeople with all different kinds of abilities. Some needed a little bit more coaching, a little bit more training. Some needed a lot of it. Some needed just kind of that gentle hand to make sure they're going down the right path. So I enjoyed that part of it more. And I said, I want to do this. And if I'm going to do it, maybe I'm of the age to do it now, and I've got enough experience built in. Let's go. Let's dive in. I turned down some other job offers and said, well, if I'm ever going to do it, it's going to be now. And it's going to require a different set of skills to learn it. And I took that challenge upon myself, and I never looked back.
I love that. I love how all those pieces connected.
Right.
So what does your life look like for you in this season of your business?
In this season of my business, what do you mean by that?
Well, just today, like where are you spending your energy? Where are you focused on?
Sure. Well, I've got, my clients and my customers come from a variety of places. So I'm always cultivating new business. I like to, out of experience and also necessity, I like to walk my own talk that I wrote about in my book in Twists of Familiar. Is you've always got to be working your pipeline and making sure that your pipeline's full, because, the job 1 and 1A, I see it for any business, to be viable and thrive and be in business, if you will, pay the bills, is twofold. The 1 and 1A is twofold. It's the retention and the acquisition of customers. And if you don't have one of those two, you can't really be successful in running your own business, especially a small business. So you've got to find your customers, and you've got to keep the ones you've got and make them return again and again and talk about you and go on social media and rave about you and all that. So that's kind of where I spend my time. My customers come from a variety of things. When you're a speaker, of course, a lot of your customers come from your infomercials. And your infomercials are simply you in front of groups doing your thing. People hiring you to speak in front of a group of, it could be for 25 people, 50 people, or it could be, 550 people or more. And it's a living infomercial. The way I look at it is, you're on stage, everybody's judging and trying to pull things from what you're saying, take things home, get some nuggets for their own use. So you're kind of living an infomercial, if you will, of people saying, I'd like this guy to come and talk to my group. And I'll often get that as an entree. They'll say, well, Gary, I was in your audience and I really like what you said about this, this, and this. Or one thing you said really stuck with me, and it was the word, whatever word it is, popcorn, comes in the brain. Oh, the story you told about popcorn. I said, oh, okay. Well, I think that would resonate for my group, and we're meeting next summer, and can we be in touch, and let's follow up? And so, a new piece of business develops from that. So that's what I spend my time doing is cultivating my pipeline through existing customers, returning customers, trying to find new customers. I use a network of colleagues to do that. I'm also on espeakers.com and several other speaker sites. But none of those sites are as successful, I think, as someone who's actually seen me or worked with me, or the word of mouth recommendations are tremendously powerful in any business, especially small business and especially a speaker business.
So it sounds like a lot of it is referral based, but a lot of it also comes from your speaking. From that's sort of most people's initial touch point with you, and that's how they learn about you is predominantly from your speaking. Is that correct?
A big chunk. I think I'd be remiss if I didn't say that one of my pieces was also just good old fashioned diligence and then bird dogging. I use LinkedIn quite a lot. I use social media as much as I can. Do I know everything that I should know or that is all there is to know about, social media and all the little nuances of that? No. But, as the old cartoon Yogi the Bear used to say, I think I'm smarter than the average bear kind of thing. So, I'm sure there's a lot I have to learn yet with AI. AI is here. AI is coming every day upon us more and more. So I'm constantly learning there. You can never really take a week off and say, yeah, I know it all. Just lay back, and you can never know it all. And so the minute you think you do, you're dead. So I do use social media as a source, and I will bird dog or look for people of interest where I can speak for them. Maybe they've got a conference going on and they make a point. And I also make a fair amount of, I shall say, soft selling, meaning that I'll add to conversations. I will post things that are compelling. I will pull articles out of publications and post on them and then comment them. So, that helps you become a speaker voice or a compelling expert, a thought leader, if you will. Let's use the word thought leader. So people start getting engaged with your posts and your input, and they do come to see you as a person who has, can put some good thoughts together. He can write well. He causes people to have some opinions of him, of his thoughts, whether they're pro or con, but at least he instigates conversation. He's maybe they can tell I'm well read, or I'm conversable in many different situations. And again, not all of them. I don't profess to be everybody's answer to everything. I don't think anybody is, actually. But, I try to do what I do and do that well.
Sounds like you got a lot going on right now.
Well, you do. You do. And as you well know, because you're very much in the small business space, you got to be careful on which hat you're wearing at which time. And you can overextend yourself in parts of you and let the other part go. And then you got a bunch of catching up to do. And by then you've missed some opportunities. If I only develop new material, which to speak on or for a client, and I forgot all about my prospecting and my bird dogging, my turning over rocks or whatever, then I would be missing opportunities. If I only spent my time looking for new opportunities, then how can I spend quality time taking care of the clients I have? So that's a delicate balance that all small business people have to walk. They're either working in their business or working on their business, or both, or all.
Yeah,
and
it is.
It's a challenge. Yeah,
it is. It is a challenge for sure. So if we shift gears a little bit and look at you working in your business, what is it that you help your clients most with?
I would say, based on what I've been told in my face, or the recommendations say that people have been kind enough or nice enough or moved enough to write, say, on my LinkedIn, is they'll often talk about my ability to be real world, to offer people real solutions, not just theories, and to make them applicable to their space or their job or their role or whatever they're doing at the time. And that would include things like, Gary, you have a unique aptitude to uncomplicate or untangle the tangled, or uncomplicate the complicated. I used the term earlier with you, Rubik's Cube. I like to figure things out. My clients, they present me with something like, Gary, we've got this issue going on in a few of our business units. And we'd like to do this because we're not doing that, and I just love that. Well, you're giving me a blank canvas and a bunch of paints to paint with on that one. I just love going to work on that. So I would say that what I offer my clients is another line of thinking and some practical tools to say, have you thought about doing it this way? Or have you thought about twisting the familiar? And I can explain what that means when you're ready. But have you thought about twisting the familiar and doing it a different way than you've been doing it? So it's practical ideas and solutions, and not just leaving them hanging, like taking them through, like, how would we get this started, Gary? How would we sustain this? How do we make it real? How do we make it stick? And though that's really, I think, several of my core strengths is I keep it real.
Yeah, so it sounds like you go in there, you do some initial diagnosis and investigation, and then come back with, like you said, real life applications to the problems that they're presenting to you.
Customization to me, Karen, is like breathing air. Mm. I chose a long time ago, since you talked about how about when I started my training and coaching and speaking business? Because I see training, coaching, and speaking as all, although there are different iterations of how you apply that, I kind of, refer to myself as a professional speaker, a business coach, and an author. Is when I decided to go into this, I was approached by several of these training companies that have their formula, right? So they're branded names. They've got a workbook. The workbook never changes. It changes. It's always the same thing. In fact, when I was in my hotel career, I would attend a few of these. You go to a certain hotel, right? And you sign the little thing in and you get a certificate at the end, and you're with all people from all walks of life learning certain things. And I was going through, HR management issues and things like that, so I could get better as a boss. But when I started my training business, I said, do I want to do that? Do I want to go with a company, say brand XYZ, and I know I could deliver their material? I mean, and especially after you've given it the first 1,800 times, you should have it down by then. But do I want to spend another Tuesday night in a Holiday Inn somewhere in the middle of winter in my old 313 area code or something where I grew up, and say, okay, same program, let's turn to page 12. I start to sound like that guy on, it was a Ben Stein on Wonder Years or something. Turn to page 12. I didn't see myself doing that. And Karen, I need a challenge and I need fresh energy. And I like to pump fresh energy into my audiences because you know what? I always think that you've probably heard this before, but the old speaking adage, well, you should always see your audience naked without any clothes on. That'll help you, I'm one of those speakers, along with Simon Sinek and some others, that say, what is that all about? Instead, my motivator in that way is, imagine you were sitting listening to you, Gary. Would you want to listen to you? And that's what keeps me driving, because I'm a pretty tough customer when it comes to being impressed by speakers and whatnot. But when I get one I love them, because they're great. So I didn't want to do that. I wanted to be a fresh spark, customize my own thing. So early on, I made the promise, and it's repeated several times on my website, so I don't let people forget it, that I'm a customization dude. I just love going in there, as you say, doing due diligence, asking questions. I've asked associations to interview some of the members of their association or their board so I can get inside a day in the life, right? Remember that great old Beatles song, A Day in the Life? And that's kind of my motto for work. It's like, let me get, and they're like, we've never been asked that before. What do you want to do that? Yeah. So when I go in front of an audience and I already talked to Karen or Susan or Ralph or Tony, and I cite them, I get their permission. I say, I may bring you up in my speech. Oh, please do. Now they look like a guru, right? I mentioned them in front of their peers, but I've talked to them about a day in their life. And so I relate to their terminology. And again, I said before, I can't be all places at one time, and I wasn't in all industries at one time. So I have a lot of learning to do about these certain industries, but I'm very proud of the fact that I've been able to speak to people in all walks of life in these different industries because I got to know their industries a bit and what their terminology was and what their hot buttons and their cold buttons were and all that. I made a decision a long time ago that I was not going to be one of those boring dudes that just gave out, the same 3 speeches. Some of them even have one, right? They had one life experience. They survived a bus that rolled down a canyon or something, and they tell that story. And there's nothing wrong with that. I get their thing. but that wasn't me. I just tried to diversify it up a little bit and customize it. So yes, it is the air that I breathe.
And I would suspect or strongly suspect that that's what makes you so successful, is that you are taking the time to really learn, like you said, the day in the life of a few people in the organization before you go ahead and make any recommendations or any other.
Yeah. Otherwise, you sometimes could come off as first of all, I have to build credibility. I believe in building credibility with my audiences. As I build credibility with someone I'm listening to who's in front of me, I want to, who is this person and why are they talking to us and what do they have to share with us? Because they're not one of us, right? There's that insular kind of thinking. And so people say, well, he was never in electronics or woodworking or, professional physician recruitment. And what does this dude know about art? He's going to tell us about go plant a flower somewhere and sit in front of it and chant. That's not going to help me. And so I get in there and I find out, and one of my best gigs ever. I mean, they were out of their seats happy. Was a tough topic. I was set up there for a tough job, and it was about physicians recruiting, which I had no idea had such a dark underside to it, in that they steal each other's people. And there's not a lot of ethics, so there wasn't. This is, a few years ago. And they said, Gary, you're going to have a group of people in there that at any given time, half of what you say, half the group is going to love it, and the other half is going to be squirming in their seats because you're talking about them. And I said very honestly to the president of the association, I said, do you want me to do that? I mean, you're hiring me. So who's my boss in the room? He says, me and my board, I am your boss in the room. We want you to cover this. And we know people are going to rise up or whatever, but we want to get conversation. We've got to start taking on ethics in our industry. It's important. We're bringing you in because we think you can do it. Now, Karen, the last thing you want to do is to go up in front of that audience and namby-pamby it. When your bosses who are paying your money told you to do that. I was up front with the audience. I said, I'm going to probably make a few of you uncomfortable, but here we go. And it was one of the best, most rewarding gigs I ever did because I fulfilled my promise of being a customized speaker who energizes people. And he told me later, and then put it in writing, people were talking about the things and the ideas that you put under their skin for the next 3 days. Now you can't, well, you may be able to, but I personally didn't think I could get any better compliment than that.
That's amazing.
It's all because I did my due diligence and I asked some questions, and I just had no idea. When you open the hood for a particular organization or industry and you find out what they really want to hear you talk about, they the dirt, they want the, for all the right reasons, because they were trying to make things better, not just a, session of complaining, then you're really rocking and rolling.
That's amazing. And to be able to be given such the opportunity to do that clearly has had huge ramifications on that organization and the members within it.
And I'll be honest with you, like all, good speakers are always a little bit nervous before their performance. I believe that if you're not a little bit nervous, you'll blow it. You'll be dead. You'll be a dud. But I was a little bit nervous before the curtain went up on that one because I know what the boss told me. His words were clearly ringing in my ears, but I thought, I don't know if they've given out donuts or anything to these people before him, but I might get a few thrown my way on stage if I really do this. But I thought, Gary, this is your time to stand up and live what you say you do and own it. And, at the end of the hour, their industry and their ethics and their some of the people, not all, but some of the people in that audience who are committing the so-called crimes, that's for them to deal with. You're going to move on to another group or whatever, but they're stuck with their demons if they're in denial. And that's exactly what the boss got. He said, we're trying to weed these people out, Gary. They're holding our association back. And boy, if I would have disappointed him, he'd never have been on my reference list. I can tell you that.
But you didn't, and you got glowing reviews, not just from him, but from so many other people. I think that's that's such a powerful story. I think it illustrates, really sticking to your guns and standing your ground and what you believe, no matter how how much fear you might have had or trepidation you might have had going into the talk, and it paid dividends for you. So,
and I say that humbly because when I was finished, I wasn't sure how he would, it's one thing to tell the speaker how to do it, but then if he hears a lot of what from the audience, like, what was that all about? Then he might think, well, Gary, he could have backed off a little bit, and then he got, I was hoping he wouldn't get jelly neat about it afterwards. Like, well, maybe in retrospect, we should have told him. Not any of that. He was like, dude, you just opened up, I mean, and in many ways, one of his board members later told me, you were asked to do something that, shame on us, we should have been doing long before we ever heard of Gary Hernbroth. But you were the instrument to that, opening that whatever you call it, but treasure trove or Pandora's box. But we've learned a lesson here that you've given us a stimulus. Now we got to go actually to do it, and that made me kind of feel good. I'm at the ground floor of something that's going to be some change. Going to twist the familiar.
Yeah, a catalyst to change. I love that. We learn the most when things don't go right. Was there a certain or a particular challenge or experience you've had that didn't go the way you wanted, and what did that teach you?
Well, you're absolutely correct that we learn typically in the negative more than we do the positive. I just used this example a week ago in front of a group, and we were talking about driving down the road, and then all of a sudden you get pulled over, you get a speeding ticket for $450. You got to go to the class, goes on your insurance, all that. And then, you kind of learn to take your foot off the pedal a little bit, when you're going to go speeding, and you learn that. And yet you would never have thought of that had you just been going along and the police would have waved at you and let you go. And, this is pretty cool. No. It took a ticket and a stop to get you to go, pivot, rethink, whatever you want to call it. So we often do that. Same with children, right? Johnny, don't put your hand near the stove. Don't put your hand near the stove. Mommy, I'm burned. Well, I guess we won't put your hand by the stove anymore. You learn from the negative rather than the positive sometimes. And oftentimes. People, it's strange enough, Karen, you brought this up, and I'll get to your answer. But people don't like to hear that. They're like, well, that's like negative learning. And I'll say, yes, it is. And if you Google the studies long enough, you'll find out that that's usually how the human brain works. We work from things that have made us scared, things that have feared, things that move us into action. We were talking earlier about earthquakes. You'll learn real quick if you have your emergency kit ready or not when you've had a few little rumbles from the earthquakes, and not when you haven't had one for years. You're not moved to go and get that kit filled out, but you will now. So yes, I've had situations in my life that didn't work out. We were working on a project and we had the money pulled out from underneath us and we weren't able to do what we wanted to do. And we thought, well, what are we going to do now? And, lesson learned that, not everybody walks their talk, but you learn from that and you learn to say, okay, one of my favorite sayings, and again, I've sprinkled around in my book because I love it. I believe in it. Coach on it, is that shift happens. And if you come into this business world, and I also talk to a lot of emerging professionals, recent college graduates, or even, underclassmen waiting to graduate in the business world. I've done some programs for Club Management Association, talking to new people coming into the business world who want to go into club management. And I spend a lot of time on shift happens because you have to be prepared for that so that you're not caught and knocked off at the knees and then you can't get up, right? So yes, it's happened to me in my career where things have been planned, but they've been changed on it. Somebody changed their mind. Somebody got, chicken or whatever. And they decide, no. We put all this work into it. And I'm like, oh, is this something I did? Is this something maybe I didn't do? Could I have done more of this? Could I have done more of that? So it's kind of a lesson in that. There's a great scene in one of the Rocky movies where Rocky's talking to his adult son and he's giving him some kind of thing out on the street. I just love the scene. And his son was getting a little bit, full of himself. And he said, life isn't about how good things are. I'm going to not paraphrase it real quick here for you, but, it's about getting knocked down and then getting back up. It's not the getting knocked down part that's so rough. It's you got to learn to get back up. And that's what learning is called, or that's what learning is all about. And I just love that scene a lot. It's about dealing with shift happens. And, do we always get the jobs? I didn't get every job I ever applied for, but I thought to myself, well, what can I learn from this? What can I take from this? Maybe maybe it wasn't the right fit. I'm also a believer that things happen or don't happen for the right reason. And I think one of the jobs I can remember was the best thing I never did, because it turned out that the job was a disaster. And it was very short-lived, working for some really bad managers. So glad I didn't get that one. And it's not always fair, but I tell the young people to keep their eyes open and be ready for when shift happens, because you'll be just washed away in the water if you're not ready for that.
I love that. Yeah. So just like you said, at that level of preparedness, and I think it allows you to pivot and change and adapt to whatever gets thrown your way.
Yeah, I don't know if you're a sports fan, but if you are, or a football fan or whatever, but you'll notice, you practice all week for an opponent, and let's say they run the opening kickoff back on you. So there's 15 seconds run off the clock and you're already down by a touchdown. Does a coach throw the game plan from the week up in the air and go, well, that's the heck with that. I guess we're not going that way. We just had it, gave up an easy, quick touchdown. Or do they say, no, let's stick to our fundamentals that got us here, the X's and O's, the blocking and tackling, and let's go get them. And it doesn't mean the game's over. 15 seconds have elapsed. If the game's over, then you weren't meant to win it anyway. So you got to have, plan Bs. But I said, how about bringing negativity or failure into a job interview for these emerging professionals? They said, well, what do you want to talk about failure for emerging professionals? I mean, I said, whoa, because everyone failed at something sometime or other, whether it's their fault or not. But my idea with that, it's also a chapter in my book, is if you're not going to bring it up, if the interviewer isn't going to bring it up, you should bring it up. And they say, why should I bring up, because in an interview, people try to be perfect, right, Karen? Everything's perfect. I did this, I did that. I was a proven track record of this. Short of walking on water, I've done it all. I say, if they're not going to bring it up, you should bring up a failure that you had. And still I get the looks like, what is he talking about? Because use that story as a launch pad to say, okay, I also want to tell you how I reacted when this happened. I was on a team that failed, or I led a team that failed, or I did something that I failed. And I learned a very important lesson from that. If you don't learn lessons from your failures and setbacks, what are you doing? What are you trying to do? To my ears, if I'm hiring somebody and they admit to me that they're not perfect, that they're not infallible, that they haven't had a perfect life in a snow globe somewhere, right, where it's all contained perfectness, they've actually skinned their knees, fallen off the bike. I mean, we all fell off a bike, right? Let's get over it, okay? That's how we learn. Now we bike. Some people bike 20 miles a day, but their first day on a bike, they fell off 6 times. Ask their parents. If you don't learn from a failure and tell me how you learn from a failure, then I don't think you're real. You either lying or you ain't been trying. That's how I like to say it. So tell me, how did you fail? What was the failure due to? And how did you learn from it? And what happened as a result of your learning moment? Well, we did this. We burned down the kitchen. But I was in charge of the kitchen in that restaurant. And so we moved this device to that device. We got a new this. We did training. We got better people. We never had another kitchen fire. And we thrived forever and ever and ever. That's a great story of what Rocky was talking about to his son. Yeah, you got knocked down. Fire in the kitchen's never a good thing. Cost your owner a lot of business. But doggone it, you didn't crumble and flake away. You learned from it. You fixed it. And the new result was you didn't repeat the disaster. And that's the kind of person that I like to have with me when I'm calling on a colleague, maybe to help me with a job assignment, or I'm looking for, some talent. Sometimes my clients are hiring me and say, Gary, we'd like you to do one-on-one coaching, and really let us know who you think the shining stars are or the next rising star is. And I'll tell you, Karen, almost unequivocally, it's somebody who we've had a conversation, because I'll ask them the very question you just asked me. When did you fall down and skin your knee? And the answer that comes out will mean a lot to me. However, they're going to refer that person, or I'm not going to refer that person. But it usually throws young people for a jolt, because somewhere someone has told them that you have to appear, look, and sound perfect all the time. And that's not life.
Yeah, so true. So true. And it's something that is a learned behavior that we've been taught, and perfection is not existent. And yeah, it's not authentic either, right? Like you said, we all make mistakes, and it's really the learnings that come from it that are key. Definitely. So Gary, you've come a long way. You've done a lot in your life and in your business. When you think about the next chapter, what does that look like for you and your business?
That's a great question. In fact, all your questions are great questions. I'd like to continue and grow my business and get into some maybe some different segments that I've not been in yet. I'd like to put my book in front of more people, and that's not just to sell books, because as you probably know, authors don't make a ton from their books financially, but I'd like to get my book in front of more people because I think it can help them and create more successes for them like that. I'm considering doing an audio book. My book just became a digital book, so Kindle and Nook and all those, it's available on that too. And just, make my brand, more aware to, and just send, get my messages out and get that many more people being successful. And I think those things tend to take care of themselves. I mean, they, several times I've had somebody pick up the phone and say, hey, coach, yes, this is so-and-so and so-and-so, and I was in one of your classes for XYZ. Oh my gosh, good to hear from you, Well, listen, I've evolved now, and I'm not a sales manager anymore. I'm a director of sales, or I'm a vice president of sales, but I never forgot you said this, and this. Do you still talk about that? Could you come and help my team? Oh man, I mean, the marching band comes through my office and balloons come out and confetti is falling around. That's just a great, great compliment for a coach. So I'd like to continue to do that and to get into some industry segments that maybe I haven't been able to crack yet or haven't put a lot of effort into, and teach the next wave of professionals to come in and learn what it's like to think about shift happens and all that.
I love that vision. I think that's an amazing vision. And there's so many more people who could definitely use your expertise and training for sure.
I hope so. We read today that there's a talent gap, and that's happened kind of since COVID. And it happened because of COVID, where these people were thrust into these positions because they were the last person standing when they got rid of everybody else. And so they gave them a title, and they thumbtacked the title on their shoulder and said, you're now the director of this or the administrator of that. And they weren't really ready for it. And that trial by fire. So a lot of them said, nope, not for me. And they left or got burned out or whatever. Some have thrived. Clearly, some have thrived. It's not all negative. But I'd like to kind of get to that part of the audience too, where they could really use some real world fleshing out of their management and supervisory and leadership talent ability. Because it's not something that's really taught in colleges to any degree. And if it is, probably not taught as well as it should be. My issue, Karen, is that the ownership of some companies feel that they should hire people that already know all this stuff, that they come prepackaged. All you have to do is hit the microwave and they'll come out as a perfect thing. And it's not that way. We've already discussed how life isn't that way. I mean, they have no idea how these people are in shift happens world. They're hiring somebody who smiles, says all the right thing on the resume. They've got all the words of the algorithms that they need in their human resources applications and all that stuff. It all adds up. But then they make a bad hire. Well, how does that happen? They have all the information in the world. They make a bad hire because they don't get to the heart of the person. So I'd like to get to that. My biggest competition is twofold. One is status quo. We're sailing along. We're not going to do anything. Our people don't need training. I mean, we're okay. That's status quo. And number two is ignorance. Because some owners and some operators of companies, again, because their results may be pretty good because we might be in a good economy or they might be in the right place at the right time or whatever, but they don't develop the people thinking, well, that's the answer to it all. It must be our great people, one that's really above that. So they don't really train them. And then these people start to leave because there's not the investment, and it's a never ending circle, but they have to wake up and say, no, we need to invest in our people. We could be losing customers. We could be this or that. And we can also get better. All of us can always get better. If for no other reason you ever want to do coaching or training, is to get better. Whether you're a small business person, a solopreneur, or a huge corporation. I haven't met one company yet that does things so perfectly that they don't need any help. That's a challenge.
Yeah, you got your work cut out for you.
Yeah. as do all the other Gary Hernbroths out there that do what I do. I mean, I don't do this alone. I don't pretend to have all my success, self-developed and all that. I learn from a lot of people. And as I talk in my book, you learn, you mentioned it earlier. I thought it was very provocative of you to say that, we learn in the negative. I've got a chapter in there about how we learn from our bosses. And then sometimes we learn more from our bad bosses than our good bosses, because we learn what not to do, what not to bring along. Gee, if I'm ever a boss of a group, I don't want to be that guy, or I don't want to be that lady, or I can't do what they do because they're not very good at what they do. They're not inspiring anybody. They're not motivating anybody. They're not doing anything. And so you learn sometimes, of course, you take the good traits from the good bosses. That's certain. And I certainly did that too. I worked for some great people, some wonderful people, but I worked for some lug nuts. And so you have to learn from both. You learn from the good and the bad all the time.
Yes, for sure. I agree. It's just learning, right? It's all data. And if you approach it from that perspective of learning, taking the good with the bad, and you take the good with the bad and you make it your own, right? You have to synthesize it and adapt it to your situation and to your position or wherever you are in life. And you just grow from it.
You have to be clear-eyed about it. You can't be in denial that, God forbid, it's something you could have done better. A lot of times today in our society, it's kind of a Teflon society, right? Nothing sticks on me. It's somebody else's fault. I was a victim of circumstances, rather than doing that inward thinking, that clear-eyed thinking, that self-examination that says, the customer asked for a proposal on this day. I got it to him like a day late because I had something going on, one of those things. Maybe you should, and the customer made some other excuse like, well, we're going to go in a different direction because it's blah, 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 blah. They're not going to tell you really the real reason. Well, you know what? Honestly, very few will. Your proposal was a day late. Now, we gave you a deadline and you missed it by a day. That's why you didn't get the business. That's on you. I'd love for that frank talk to happen between people, but, everyone's so, non-confrontational. But people need to learn from things like that and go, no, I should have got off my you-know-what and got the proposal in 2 days early rather than on the day or a day late. That's why you lost the business. So you've got to be able to self-examine yourself and go, no, I didn't handle that phone call correctly. I didn't ask the right questions. I said the wrong thing. I didn't make a good enough case. I mean, we need to do a little bit of that and forget this world out there that's telling us, again, this idea of perfection, and again, nothing is ever your fault. They weren't going to book with you anyway. Oh, they weren't going to. Well, you can live in that never land if you want. But I don't know the Captain Hook ship is going to come and take you away from it anytime soon. So you're kind of stuck there. But stop blaming others and do an inward look and say, I need, and also sometimes I need to get help. I need to hire a coach. I need to hire somebody who can kind of push me along and yes, kick me in the rear end if I need kicking, and make sure I'm staying to be true to my goals, whatever. I've had to have a lot of tough love talks with my clients. I first have to know that I can go there. I have to know my boundaries with them. But we get that straight at the get-go. I said, do you want me to be honest if I find something or not? Oh, no, yeah. So that's where you go if you're a coach. A good coach doesn't just jump right in. You got to kind of feel your way around a little bit and say, do you want me to, if I find 6 typos in your email, do you want me to tell you about that? And I'm not yelling at you. I'm not shaming you. I'm just doing a factual thing. Your email has 6 typos. Okay, that's a fact. It's not an emotion. And if we can cross that bridge, then I know the person really does want to get better and be helped. So it can be a dicey proposition to coach other people if they have this denial thing. And there's people I know that have approached me and I didn't necessarily want to work with them. Well, they already know it all. Why would they need me?
Yes, you can't teach someone who knows it all. They're clearly not interested in learning. But
No.
I love your approach. I love the way you frame the conversation and the way you work with people. I think that's the key, and that opens the doorway.
Thank you.
That allows you to do what you do. Gary, thank you so much for sharing your story. Where can our listeners find you online?
I'm real easy to find. My website is trainingforwinners.com. Now that's training4, F-O-R, winners.com. I also am on LinkedIn. I have a Twitter account. I have a Facebook business account, which is Training for Winners again. I have an Instagram account, and they can find all about me and again, all about twists of familiar, and I'm easy to find. Full disclosure.
Great. We'll have the links in the show notes. And thank you again so much for joining me on the Leadership Lab. It was a real pleasure speaking with you today.
Well, Karen, you asked excellent questions. You're an excellent interviewer, and I hope that I was able to help your readers in just a little bit of way in getting them to think and maybe have a call to action.
You provided a lot of insights and dropped a lot of nuggets. Thank you so much.
Thank you for calling on me. It was a pleasure.
For spending your time with me today on the Leadership Lab podcast. My hope is that this conversation sparked a new perspective or reinforced something you already knew. Until next time, keep leading with curiosity and intention.